Welcome to the Putcast podcast by Pharmacists United for Truth and Transparency. Pharmacists United for Truth and Transparency is the only registered 501c3 nonprofit wholly dedicated to exposing the hard truths about pharmacy benefit managers and how their greed-centered, profit-at-any-cost business practices are driving up drug prices and healthcare premiums while reducing consumer choice and endangering patient access. To learn more, visit our website at truthrx.org.
Hi, I'm Lauren Young. Welcome to this episode of the Putcast, brought to you by Pharmacists United for Truth and Transparency. As many of you know, this podcast does tend to lean a little more toward the political or legislative issues in the pharmacy realm, and I'm so excited to have my friends from Arkansas, the Arkansas Pharmacists Association, as well. So give a warm welcome to all of our many guests. John Vinson, the CEO of APA. Welcome back, John. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having us, Lauren.
Well, we have a trio of legislative warriors on the PBM reform fight in Arkansas. So I'm so glad to have you all with me. And we're going to start with Representative Jeremiah Moore. You are the primary lead sponsor in the House in Arkansas for the newest bill, HB 1150. As many of our listeners know, there was a press conference held in Arkansas in the middle of January where you guys discussed some very interesting tactics on how to take this fight to PBM reform to the next level. So welcome to the show, Representative.
Thank you. Glad to be here. For me, I represent a large swath of rural East Arkansas and the Arkansas Delta, parts of 5 counties. My House district, we got about 30,000 people in each House district in the state. I have one of the larger districts with 127 miles separating my north border from my southern border. And in between those two borders are about 12 independent pharmacies. I will add that there's not a single PBM-owned pharmacy in my district. So really supporting these independent neighborhood pharmacies is a really big part of why we're running House Bill 1150. Happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate your support, and I think that's so important that legislators know all of the different community pharmacies in their district, because pharmacy deserts are popping up all over this country, and that's impacting patient access. It's hurting those small communities that they're in. So we're very grateful for your support on this front. And we have another distinguished member of the Arkansas House with us, Representative Brandon Achor. And Representative Achor, you are a pharmacist. You're a pharmacy owner. I got to hear you speak at the press conference a couple weeks ago, and you had a very powerful testimony. And I love the fact that you have gotten on board and obviously supported this legislation, not only as an owner, a pharmacist, a legislator, a patient. You're wearing a lot of different hats for this bill.
Yes, and thank you for having us. And I do, again, want to commend Representative Moore. A lot of people assume that because I'm a pharmacist into the legislature that obviously this is something that I'm going to just champion immediately and kind of take the lead on. And I tell everybody, like, Jeremiah Moore really met with his constituents, leaned heavy on his district, and that's who crafted this. And I'm happy to be here to help obviously support the mission of it, but I think it's a real, a real grassroots, and embodies it, that not only would Representative Moore take the time to really seek out and do the due diligence for his own district, but that his own district is really pushing this. And so it makes it a real constituent-driven issue that I'm happy to just stand here as a co-sponsor and provide any industry expertise I can. But I like to tell people that, there is obviously the pharmacy-facing side of this. There's the patient-facing side of this, but also there's the cost to the overall healthcare rising cost side of this as well. And employers who take issue with them having to foot the bills should welcome this, should welcome the removal of the one entity that has bared zero risk in the healthcare climb of costs and actually contributed directly to it. So I'm excited for Jeremiah Moore and Senator Hammer to really champion this.
And Representative Moore, I know that sometimes legislators who don't have a healthcare pharmaceutical background can find all of these topics a little daunting. It's hard for even pharmacy owners to wrap their arms around all of the different loopholes that these PBMs tend to find year after year. So I really am grateful that you have the support of a pharmacy owner on your side in this, and you've really been a leader in this. And hopefully other legislators have decided to come on board and, decide that this is important for all of the constituents in their district in Arkansas. Whether or not they go to an independent pharmacy or not, it can still impact their community.
Speaking of other legislators, I would be remiss if I didn't give my sincere appreciation to Senator Kim Hammer right here to my left, because without him, we might be DOA in the Senate. So just want to give many thanks and props to Senator Hammer for all his hard efforts on this issue.
Well, we love the efforts of Senator Kim Hammer from Arkansas. We have had the pleasure of working with him at PUT as not only whenever he joined us for our legislative summits in the past, but just a supporter in all of the issues that you have done. So great to see you again, Senator Hammer, and we're glad that you're the lead sponsor in the Senate for the HB 1150.
Thanks very much. I appreciate Representative Moore stepping up to take the challenge and being joined by Representative Achor and others that have recognized, and I always use the analogy, and John and Deborah know this, that I liken this unto a chess match. We make a move and the PBMs make a move, and we've been doing that for a long time since Senator Caldwell was involved in this, and other legislators going back several years, and it has been an ongoing challenge, but hopefully we are about to be put in a position where we can issue a checkmate. But we know also the battle is always going to be there, the potential for it. I do have the uniqueness in my district of having pharmacies that are independent, pharmacies that are owned by PBMs, large pharmacies that are chain pharmacies. Unfortunately, I have the unpleasant experience of one of the largest, at the time, the largest independent pharmacy in my county, in my city, go out of business. And the sheer chaos that it created at the time for all those patients to find someone who could meet their needs. And fortunately, we had a good network of independent pharmacies, others who are not owned by PBMs, and that's where the vast majority of them gravitated to. So I think that makes a statement within themselves that they are looking to support those that support them 24/7.
I think we all know that the independent pharmacy staff really are the most accessible healthcare providers in the community. This is so much more than just filling the prescriptions for patients in the district. So, John, why don't you give our listeners a little background into what exactly is in HB 1150 in case they did miss the press conference?
Sure. So big picture, I was visiting with Lauren that our association for at least the last 25 years has been battling some form of, on the business side, insurance reform, or in more recent years, PBMs or pharmacy benefit manager reforms. Some of our members, like the pharmacy that Senator Kim Hammer mentioned a minute ago, that was in my community. That community lost compounding. They lost sterile compounding, one of only two in the state at that time, as well as the chaos of home delivery, nursing home, hospice, and services that the chain that some of the prescriptions were going to weren't able to meet those needs. Our pharmacies are resilient. They're very innovative and resilient, but they're not invincible. And part of our strategy, I know today we're talking about a bill that stops anti-competitive acts. In the title or in the introduction of the bill, it says that the state of Arkansas wishes to stop the fox guarding the hen house from anti-competitive monopolies, both being price setters and price takers, that the Federal Trade Commission, U.S. House oversight, and multiple national news articles have shown that these companies are driving up the price by thousands of % to themselves while underpaying their local pharmacies that provide a higher level of service, in many cases out of business at prices that are under their cost to operate those pharmacies. That's just not acceptable. We need to end that. In the big picture of where this fits into the reform, we've worked on pricing, we've worked on enforcement of existing laws. We know there's ongoing litigation, but in the big picture, we also have to stop anti-competitive acts. If you have anti-competitive acts happening, you can't operate in a market that serves your patients in the way they need to be served. And this bill is taking care and attacking those anti-competitive acts. Our Attorney General was at that press conference, for those of you who saw it. Attorney General Tim Griffin, our Lieutenant Governor Leslie Rutledge was also there in support. The former Attorney General that fought the PBMs to the U.S. Supreme Court on the implementation and enforcement of unfair pricing legislation. So we have widespread support. The Attorney General shared news that his team of legal experts had studied the bill and they believe it's enforceable and that it would hold up through a legal challenge should one to occur. We don't want that to occur because we think it's clear that states decide who has a license and states have ability to decide what is an anti-competitive act. That doesn't just happen at the Federal Trade Commission or the U.S. Department of Justice. States have rights too, and our state policies and laws, I think, will shape and turn up the heat on what happens nationally. So back to your question, Lauren, about what does it actually do? The legislation does just this. It says that if you are an insurance company or a PBM, you may not own or operate a pharmacy and you're not entitled to a license to do business. We have about 35 brick and mortar pharmacies in the state that are owned by PBMs or insurance companies, and about 99 mail order facilities that are mostly owned by the large three, CVS, Optum, and Express Scripts, although there are some more pharmacies that are affiliated with companies. Novitas, MedImpact, Humana, Prime Therapeutics is a challenging one where we've seen some complaints at the insurance department recently where they were paying their own pharmacies more than the local pharmacies. That's under investigation by the insurance department. But this bill would stop that from happening effective January 1st, 2026.
I love everything that you have put into this bill because people need a solution that is not 3 or 4 years down the road. This has a start date of 2026. And so that is some light at the end of the tunnel for pharmacy owners. That's what they need to hear. Representative Achor, I'm sure that you can relate to some of your other pharmacy owners that know that it's hard to be a small business owner anyway, but to have these kind of competitors fighting every single day against you in so many different ways is so hard and draining on those owners. Is there anything you can tell our listeners, as now that you're a legislator, what you can kind of see from that side and the hope you can give them?
Yes, I appreciate the question. I think the most daunting part of it all is that the PBMs seem to be completely fine with being non-compliant with state law. I mean, they are regular, habitual, and systemic lawbreakers for close to a decade now. The amount of time and effort that we have to spend filing complaints month after month, I mean, it gets into the thousands that are sent every month to the Arkansas Insurance Department. And that pattern of behavior is comes from a place the PBMs say, catch us if you can. We understand this is a complaint-based issue. For every one independent who takes the time to filter and correctly complain, there's 100 others that aren't. The slap on the wrist isn't even a slap on the wrist at this point. And I think that, not being punished for something shouldn't be the only, motivator for you to be a good actor in the state of Arkansas. The law is clear. The ability to track NADAC is clear. The ability to set prices is clear. I mean, you obviously have a fair and reasonable rate that you pay yourselves. You're familiar with how to do this correctly, and you were adamantly choosing to not do that on a very systemic basis in the state of Arkansas. So I think from our perspective, I love that this is not really a negotiation. The negotiation was the last 10 years for you to be a good actor. And at this point, you've shown you have no remorse. And I applaud Representative Moore and Senator Hammer for seeing that as well.
Absolutely. Like you said, if someone is continuously showing you that they're willing to be a bad actor and being okay with getting caught, then it's time that there was some more stick than carrot approach to what's happening. And so that's one thing that we really applaud the HB 1150 for having in the ability to see that this is a consequence to the actions that PBMs have been doing to different patients in Arkansas.
Lauren, I want to jump in real quick, if I can. In your question to Brandon, you mentioned competitors, meaning the PBM-owned pharmacies.
Mhm.
These folks aren't competitors. If anything, these are anti-competitors. When they're trying to actively drive Brandon and people like him out of business, this is not tacit. They're steering. They are paying them at or just below cost. These are not competitors. These are anti-competitors. And I'm not sorry, but you go above and beyond breaking the system for a decade, and I wouldn't think you should expect anything less than a heavy hand from the state of Arkansas in dealing with that type of behavior. It's anti-competitive at best, crony capitalism, to say the least, and we're just not going to stand for it.
I love the fact that you have been able to look behind the curtain and see that these are not true partners, as they claim in every legislative committee hearing and in every press release that they put out, that this is really David versus Goliath, and all the Davids are trying as hard as they can. And so we're so grateful to have all of you and so many of the other co-sponsors of this legislation in the corner for patients in Arkansas and community pharmacy owners.
I'll say this on the record. If this were not an issue, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It's not that vertical integration is inherently bad. It's just that when you allow folks to vertically integrate, they're going to take advantage of the system. We're all humans. Do I necessarily fault them for screwing over all their competitors? That's just human nature, in my humble opinion. But the buck stops here.
Mm-hmm.
If I may add to that point, that, I've said before, I don't think all PBM are bad actors, but the ones that are playing the long game as far as systematically eliminating the competition under the coverage of the laws as they currently exist, that within itself, I think, is what reveals the problem. And I do think, because some people have criticized or have said, why are you interfering with free market? Well, part of what I think our responsibility as legislators is to make sure that the playing field is level. And I think over a long period of time, the PBMs that own their own pharmacies, because they have not been held accountable, have been allowed to work their way into a position that they can afford to play the long game, because they can afford to pick off independent pharmacies and others that don't own their own pharmacies one at a time, because they have the resources to do it. But you take somebody like Representative Achor or any other independent pharmacist, their ability to cash flow or their ability to be able to have a real negotiating seat at the table, because it's a take it or leave it scenario. I think when you see that level of unfairness and that injustice, and using the law to your own selfish ambition, especially at taxpayers' expense, who are paying higher prices because of that structure, I think that's where we are justified as legislators to step in and say, we're going to bring this thing back in line. It should have never been allowed to get out as far as it did, but we're going to bring it back to a level playing field. So I think maybe that's a 100,000 foot view looking down, but I think that's what calls for us to legislatively get involved.
Again, we are small business, but it's a very niche type of business where the quality of care and access really does matter. I tell people all the time, it's, we're not selling popsicles or, we're not selling toasters. There's a real harm to the state of Arkansas should independent pharmacies no longer exist. I mean, being sick as myself, being sick with my wife, seeing everyday patients, they're scared. It is scary to be told that you are sick. It is scary to be told that your child is sick. It is scary to walk your, parents through hospice care. People don't want to be scared with a mailbox. Okay, they want to be scared with their local pharmacist. They want to go there, receive some necessary counseling, go home, forget everything they just heard, turn around and be able to go talk to the same person again. I mean, that level of what this is small business, but it's a much more, there's a lot more at risk to the entire state of Arkansas should this access be removed.
Absolutely. And like you said, that there are people who look to their pharmacists as that trusted healthcare provider to navigate those kind of scary conversations. They don't want a 1-800 number from a mail order to someone they've never spoken to, has no idea about anything that they're talking about because they don't know them. And so the patients in Arkansas should have the freedom and the ability to go where they choose without having penalties or being, having consequences for that. And the pharmacy owners are trying to have the patient access that legislators want for their constituents. And Arkansas Department of Insurance has done a very good job of really showing other states what the departments of insurance can do to help the enforcement mechanism in states. Because we hear all the time from our PUT listeners and different owners in other states that they've gotten the law passed, but the Department of Insurance is being told by the PBM that they don't have to follow that law, or they don't know how to follow that law. And so Arkansas has really led the way in saying, we passed the law, this is how you follow it, this is the consequences for not following it, and this is more consequences for disregarding that. So you guys are just continuing to build the road that everyone is going down for PBM reform. And you guys are not afraid as legislators to remind people that reimbursement is an important part of PBM reform.
Yeah, I agree. I would say this legislation won't be the only thing that is needed to fix the market, but it is a big step forward. And the enforcement side of pricing, or whether it is licensure acts, or whether it is clawbacks or audits, is complicated because of conflicting federal laws that they claim preemptions, or they argue over a comma or the word "or," as Representative Achor likes to remind me, in the existing laws. But the thing about this law is that $225 billion of prescriptions are forced to PBM-owned pharmacies at higher prices than they would be locally. So this law doesn't ban mail order pharmacy. If a patient wants to choose a mail order pharmacy that's not owned by PBM, we'll have at it. There are 500 of them. Mm-hmm. If they want to choose a local pharmacy to mail or delivery, they can. But no longer will they be forced to a mail order pharmacy owned by the PBM that they wouldn't otherwise choose if there was a fair, level playing field. This is about fair pricing, local access, and better health care. And this legislation is a big step forward to accomplishing that goal.
I'd like to insert something based on what you said a while ago. I believe you made the comment that they have said we don't have to follow that law. And that within itself, I think, is incriminating, because we pass laws, and laws have intent, and we are very clear about what the intent is. And while maybe the intent doesn't exactly hold up in a court of law, it's going to be what is enacted. You have to take it holistically. And if you have an entity that is saying, we don't care what law you pass, we're going to want to do what we want to do, that is a reflection of the moral compass that is guiding that entity, regardless of whatever it is. If we have a history of passing legislation that says we just want a standard of fairness, but you're saying we don't care what your law says, we're going to do what we want to do, that within itself, I think, provides self-evidence that we are dealing with a entity that doesn't really care what we think. They're going to do what they want. And I think that this law is a reaction to that attitude. So it will be that they have brought it on themselves that we are having to do what we're doing.
It's a fulfillment of our responsibility, or our duty to both the patients and the taxpayers of Arkansas. If this FTC report had been timed a few months from now, it might be a lot more difficult. But the fact that there's hard evidence by the Federal Trade Commission that they're spending our taxpayer dollars, our patients' dollars, lining their own pockets at the expense of these sick people and our state taxpayers, we're going to do something about it.
Absolutely. And everyone listening can go to rxreformnow.com. There's already over 4,000 people that have signed on in support for their petitions. I know that most of you as legislators obviously hear from your community pharmacists about all kinds of different issues. But if there's anyone out there that is still nervous about talking to their legislators because they know this is a very complicated issue and there's a lot of lobbying dollars that are going against us. Representative Achor, could you give someone who might be newer to advocacy but is still trying to save their store some tips on how they can talk to their legislator about this very complex issue of going up against PBM mafia?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Myself, having been an active member of the Arkansas Pharmacists Association throughout the early parts of my career, that sort of mystique of I'm not qualified to have this type of relationship with an elected official, or there's some sort of, multiple hoops or mechanisms that I need to go through to appropriately interact with them, was completely torn away. I would say that every elected official should, and the majority of all of them that I know, really respond well to direct constituent interaction. It has to be genuine, and I think that it has to be repetitive. I think that you have to maintain that engagement because you have to put a face to the black and white letters, or the black letters on the white page, right? Because the lobbyists certainly are engaged, but they're engaged because they're paid to do so. They don't want it as bad as I do as a patient. They don't want it as bad as I do as a pharmacy owner. They don't want it as bad as I do as a patient advocate. And I would just encourage that, yes, there is this general distaste for lobbying, and there's a general distaste for the whole political spectrum. It doesn't have the best marketing department, I would say, for politics. It's not.
Especially contract lobbyists.
Yeah, exactly. But,
not association.
Not association.
Just to clarify.
But just the terms in general. I can see how it feels, David and Goliath. But when it comes to how your representative views you, you're the Goliath.
And if we don't hear from constituents, sometimes we operate under the pretense that everything is okay. Respectful dialogue is always at the top of the list. But if we don't hear from constituents or the people that are being affected, other things might get our attention where we are being communicated with. So it is important that constituents communicate with their representatives like Representative Achor or Representative Moore, myself, and the vast majority of legislators in Arkansas, the vast majority know this is a problem we've got to fix. I think that's why there's good support for it.
And a lot of legislators work in industries where they haven't even heard of the term vertical integration, used it as part of the vernacular because that's what we've been dealing with for 20 years. But even explaining that we've got somebody who's both a price setter and a price taker destroying our industry, that in itself is part of that education.
Well, the precedence that is being set in the PBM industry is being modeled in other healthcare industries as well. And so if we can't get it stopped here and now, well, we're sending a message to other entities within the healthcare system is it's okay because they got to do it, so we can do it too. And so I think what we're doing here is bigger than just dealing with a PBM that owns its own business that's steering it money to itself. We're sending a message to the rest of the healthcare industry. You better watch what you're doing because it won't end up well for you.
Absolutely. We've seen providers, doctors really getting more engaged over the last couple of years because they are seeing the same healthcare conglomerates. OptumRx is owned by United Healthcare. United Healthcare does now own several doctors' offices across the country. And so they're seeing those same underwater payment reimbursement issues going on in their own offices. They're seeing United Healthcare owned doctors, kind of take over things. And so this is not just going to stop at the independent community pharmacies. So that's why, like you mentioned, Senator Hammer, it's important for us to be able to work with other entities in the healthcare spectrum and get all the advocates on board because there's providers, there's hospitals in all of y'all's districts that are fighting some of these same healthcare entities. So we're so grateful that they have come alongside us and really been great partners and advocates. I wish we could clone all of you and bring you to our state, Illinois, and across the country to make sure that legislators understood how important this topic is. Representative Moore, I'm going to let you start off to wrap up. If there's anything that you want our listeners to know about HB 1150 or how they can help get your bill through, please let us know.
I'll say this. Healthcare is a very complicated issue. What's not complicated is paying yourself thousands of percentage points above the actual cost of the drug while paying your competitors at or even below cost. That is the impetus behind this legislation. So reach out to your own legislators. Tell them that you live in their district. Tell them what your interest is. Be respectful, be kind, because they might not understand it. But the more that this whole picture comes into play, the more ground that we're going to be able to gain.
And Representative Moore, was there any particular information that you heard from your community pharmacist that really helped push you over the edge to become this PBM reform champion? We have so much data at our fingertips. It's hard for us as owners and pharmacists to figure out what is going to be that tipping point for that legislator.
My county, where I live, Monroe County, there's a population of about 6,400 people. There was a point in time just recently when we were nervous that we were going to even have a pharmacy in our county. One went out of business in Brinkley, and the other one was up for sale and could have easily just not been bought or just moved entirely. And that helped me realize that unless we do something to fix this issue, these pharmacy benefit managers are trying to force everybody to their own mail order pharmacy or their own CVS. Let me tell you, CVS, Genoa, they're not going to put a pharmacy in Clarendon, Arkansas. We're barely struggling. To have 1,500 people in our city limits. I've got neighbors on medications that can't afford, for their own health's sake, to be on a mail order pharmacy. We got to have brick and mortars. We got to have our neighborhood pharmacies. And that is a real reason and impetus behind why I filed House Bill 1150.
We are so grateful that you did. And Representative Achor, can you give us some parting words and moments of hope for some other pharmacy owners out there?
I would say, don't reinvent the wheel. A lot of work has been done in the state of Arkansas. I've reviewed the RX Reform Now website, and I think it's put together beautifully. It says why this affects you, how this affects your community, and what you can do about it. So honestly, reviewing those points, that's what a legislator who has no healthcare background and no real concept of what's going on, the information that's shared on that website is done extremely, extremely well. I don't think anybody could read the homepage of that website and think this isn't a cause worth championing.
I completely agree with you. And again, thank you for your support of HB 1150. Senator Hammer, do you have any closing words for us as one of our longtime PBM reform champions?
I would just, I think you asked something a while ago about a message. The loudest message I think that you never want to hear are the doors of your pharmacy closing. And having been through that personal experience, ironically, not just a family-owned, long-time standing pharmacy, but also in my neighborhood, we had a CVS pharmacy close years ago. And so there's experience on both ends of the spectrum. The difference, I think, is that those local independent pharmacies are investing in their communities, and they're there for the long haul. And if their doors have to shut or they have to be sold, it's not because they want to, it's because they were made to. And then you have a case like in our situation in town, one of the towns I represent, where CVS just pulled out. They pulled out because it wasn't profitable. And I think the difference is You have the local pharmacies that are investing their profits back into their local community, whereas you have these PBMs are sucking the economy out and sending it somewhere else. They don't buy the football ads. They don't buy the program ads. They don't buy the local things. It all goes out of your community. And people need to realize that when that begins to happen, it's just like a school leaving your town. It leaves a big dent that can't be replaced. The last thing I would say is this: deserts are deserts because there's no life-giving water in order to make things grow and happen. If we start to see deserts throughout our state because local pharmacies have been forced out of business, what we're going to end up with are deserts, and the only people that are going to be hurt are those that are left in the deserts, and it's our job to protect them.
Well, John Vinson, I don't think you could have gotten 3 better PBM champions for this episode. So I'm so grateful that you have put together this trio of wonderful legislators for us to pick their brains and talk a little bit about HB 1150, because there are so many pharmacy owners that do watch what Arkansas does. We have been watching what you guys have been doing over the last decade to see how we can help mimic the success that so many of your pharmacies have been able to see. And so we cheered along beside you whenever Act 900 went on the national stage. We will continue being behind you and pushing RX reform now. John, is there anything that you want our listeners to know and be reminded of in our last couple minutes?
I would just say we have a lot of friends in the state, great leaders in the legislature, as you've heard from some of them today, some of the very best. There are many others in many other states. A lot of national associations have supported us along the way, including states like Georgia and Oklahoma and North Dakota, just to name a few, West Virginia, many, many others. One of the things that has felt good or validating is we had data in 2018 for patients who logged into their patient portal that saw that the big PBMs, in particular one named CVS, was paying itself $65 more a script on every drug in the top 200 list. Every single drug, not just cherry pick some here and there specialty. It was every single drug they were doing that in commercial insured plans, not in every network, but in the local employer plans. That was happening. And I don't think it's any coincidence that CVS's footprint stopped growing, that one left its district when the state put an end to that, at least with CVS in that investigation. But we continue to see other PBMs violate the law. It's difficult to catch them. And I think in this particular case, the FTC reports, the data coming out of Georgia, the data coming out of Mississippi that validated what we had seen in this state. And then I think the tip of the iceberg was the leukemia drug, where leukemia patients were paying $19,200 at a PBM-owned pharmacy, and those same drugs would be between $60 and $100 at a local pharmacy in a community like Clarendon in his district. That's ridiculous. That should be illegal, and we're going to make sure in this state that it is illegal.
We are so grateful for all of the effort that you all put forward to helping our profession, our patients continue to grow and hopefully stay open. As Senator Hammer mentioned, one of the worst sounds is closing the doors of pharmacy. So again, we're so glad that HB 1150 has been filed, and we will continue to watch it go through the chambers in Arkansas, and we are there to support. And if you're a patient in Arkansas, if you are a pharmacy owner in Arkansas, please go to rxreformnow.com.
And we're calling on our patients, because this isn't just about the pharmacies. It's about our patients. And rxreformnow.com is all about engaging patients in the process.
That's right. Let's keep the access to community pharmacies open. Let's help patients continue to go to whatever pharmacy they want to. As you all have mentioned, that's the most important part, putting the patients first. So thank you all so much for all your time today. We really appreciate it. Our support at PUT is behind all of our friends at the Arkansas Pharmacists Association and our patients in Arkansas. And if you missed any of this information, you can always go to our website, truthrx.org. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast. If you don't know us, we are from Pharmacists United for Truth and Transparency, or PUT, and you can join us at truthrx.org, and you can get a multitude of different resources. You can sign up for our newsletters. You can follow us on social media. You can really get a wealth of information from all of our outlets. You can also donate to our cause at truthrx.org/donate. We appreciate your time today, and hopefully you'll join us for the next episode of the podcast.
PBMs are robbing you day in and day out, making you work for below-cost reimbursements. Billion-dollar corporations hurting hard-working independent pharmacy owners as they line their pockets and put so many of you out of business. And now it's happening with so many pharmacy software vendors that have sold out to billion-dollar hedge funds. Are you truly happy with your pharmacy software vendor? Is support what it used to be, or you find yourself waiting on hold? Are your issues resolved in a timely fashion? When is the last time you took a look at the bill from your pharmacy software vendor? Perhaps it's time for a change. Visit our website at www.datascanpharmacy.com and give us a call at 1-877-222-7979.